Bright QT. Every student matters.
Hello everyone. So let's start with our next subtopic here, that is intellectual awakening. Now before this students, we were talking about the causes of French Revolution. Now in this part, we learnt about that in 1774, Louis XVI, he ascended the throne in France at the age of 20, and he was married to an Austrian princess whose name was Marie Antoinette, right? We also saw that when Louis XVI, he came to the power, he became the king or monarch, he saw empty treasury, and there were various reasons related to this point, right? We saw that it was a great source that led to, or a great factor that led to financial stress in France. And apart from that, the loans now they were charged at 10% interest. We also learnt about that. We also saw that the society that was divided into 3 states, now here the brunt was on the third state to do what? To pay taxes, right? They had to face this crisis during this period of time, right? So here we see that some of these reasons, and when we are assimilating all the other reasons that we are going to learn one by one here. So all these reasons combined, it led to the French Revolution. So like I told you, one by one we are going to understand each and every point here. So right now we are going to understand about the intellectual awakening. Yes students. Now when we are talking about the social causes, it comes under the heading that is the social causes. Okay. So the emergence of new social group in France, it was one of the reasons that led to the French Revolution. Now how are we going to understand that? We have to understand it through this point here, that when we were talking about the ancient regime, we saw that in French society, feudal system existed. We understood how peasants were suppressed, they had to work under their lord, and also how the conditions were very much different. But after 18th century, by the end of 18th century, we are seeing that many changes are taking place here. And one of these changes were that coming up of rich and new educated class in France, right? So this is a group of intellectuals here. So rich educated middle class who demanded a society based on equality. Yes students. Now whenever we are talking about the emergence of new social class or new social group here, it means that the middle class who were rich as well as educated, they had a lot of knowledge, and now they began questioning the existing government there, the existing absolute monarchy there. So they believed that no one should enjoy privileges based on or based by birth. Rather, the society should be based on equality. Now, whom they are referring to here? They are referring to the first and second states who enjoyed certain privileges. They were not allowed to pay any tax. Definitely, yes. So, these people, they started spreading awareness among the middle class, the so-called common people there, right? And major role was played by the philosophers, the learned people, right, who gave different theories, different philosophies related to the existing situation in France. Now here in this topic, when we are talking about the intellectual awakening, we are going to learn about 3 important philosophers, the great philosophers that existed in France at that particular time. So the first name here is John Locke, the second name is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and the third name is Montesquieu. Okay? But students, in our book, another name that has been mentioned is Voltaire. So, I have mentioned 3 names here. We are going to talk about the other one, Voltaire here. We are going to talk about Rousseau, we are going to talk about Montesquieu, and we are going to talk about the contribution of Voltaire, another great philosopher, right, that existed here. Now, when we are talking about John Locke, he was also a great philosopher who wrote a famous book, that is treatises of government. Rousseau, he wrote the social contract, and Montesquieu, he wrote the spirit of the laws. Right? We are going to talk about Voltaire as well, who wrote Candide, a famous satirical novel. Right, students? So one by one, let us understand what were their thoughts, what were their theories, or what were their philosophies, and how they contributed in spreading this awareness among common people. Now, why are we talking about common people again and again? Because students, it was these common people only who went on and who started this revolution, who challenged the authority of the king here, right? So, firstly, we are going to talk about Voltaire, and the timeline for Voltaire here is 1694 to 1778. Now, when we are talking about Voltaire, he was a famous writer and critic who used to criticize the government and also how did they work. He launched bitter attacks against the church and the state. Definitely, we have seen that the church, that included the clergy, state ruled by the kings or monarch, definitely Voltaire, who was a great philosopher and a great critic, he was against the ideas of the church and the state. So, he launched bitter attacks against them. He also made fun of nobles and the way they behaved and governed, and was against absolute monarchy. Very important point here. Now, students, you have to understand that nobles, clergy, they were the privileged class here, and they were against the wishes or the will of common people. So definitely all these philosophers, they were against the ideologies of the church, the state and the nobles. So here he was a great novelist writer who made fun or mockery of the nobles, right? And how they were behaving, how they governed, all these points were taken in mind here, and he used these points in order to mock them, right? He was also against absolute monarchy. Now, like I told you, absolute monarchy, that is, monarch had the supreme authority, right? Now, another important point that we have to keep in mind here while we are talking about Voltaire is that he defended freedom of speech and religious tolerance, right? He was in favor of freedom of speech. He believed that every person is free and also they have the right to express their views, right? So, freedom of speech and religious tolerance in that particular region, right? Everyone should believe in religious tolerance. So, therefore, what are we seeing here? We see that he is making fun of the nobles. He is against the whole idea of absolute monarchy. Also, he is against the ideas of the church and the state, and based on it, he wrote a famous satirical novel that was named as Candide, right? So here the term satirical, it means that he used humor, irony, right, in order to criticize a particular person or government and so on. So the famous novel here, it was published in the year 1759. So the hero of this novel was Candide himself, and also in this novel he showed how the state, church and nobles, how they destroyed the life or of the hero of the novel, right, whose name was Candide. Okay, so this was the views of whom? Of Voltaire.